Trenbolone makes you feel like you are literally a god, and like everyone around you is a fucking peasant. What's up YouTube, I'm Mike, and today I'm shooting the second in a video series that's basically Bob Does Steroids. So if you have not watched the first video in the series, you're definitely going to want to watch this video here so that you understand who Bob is and why I'm talking in the third person. As you can see from the wording on my shirt, this video is going to be all about Trenbolone. This stands to be a very long video because there's a lot of topics that I want to discuss, so please look in the description below for timestamps to the parts that you might be interested in the most. I was originally going to shoot a video showing Bob's cycle on Tren and decided to really talk about just the Tren first because I feel like it's sort of the untold love story. Basically, everywhere you go on the internet, it seems, someone is bad-mouthing Tren, saying that they'll never use it again, that you shouldn't use it, that it's not worth it, that there are other compounds that you can use to get equivalent gains. More Plates, More Dates have said this, Bigger Steve, Greg Doucette, Ryan Ankrum, I even believe. Basically, everyone that Bob came across warned him away from using this compound, and so he was very apprehensive to try it. Bob, however, is one of those people that he just needs to know for himself. He can't really learn from others' experiences. He's got to just go out there and plot his own course. And so he decided that he wanted to try Tren. Bob has now run 2 cycles of Tren, one at 350 milligrams and one at 550 milligrams. So I feel like Bob's experience is relevant because he's got a pretty decent, bit of, those are decent doses. There's nothing crazy high, but should certainly be enough to tell us what we can expect side effects wise, gains wise, etc. from using Trenbolone enanthate, which is the compound that Bob chose to use. To also bring everything together and make this video as cohesive as possible, we've got some testimony from Bob's wife. Because obviously when a guy's on steroids, he may tend to view his experience differently than those around him, his loved ones. And so I felt like it would be even more valuable to get an outside opinion because I want to let you know right out the gate, Bob loves Trenbolone. Bob talked in the previous video, or the previous video was about Bob's experience with Deca and how he didn't really like the drug, how he felt like 19 NOR drugs might not be for him. And apparently that's not the case because Bob has developed an undying love affair for this compound. Bob wants to marry Tren, he wants to have sex with Tren, he wants to make babies with Tren, he wants there to be a bunch of little Tren-ba-bobs run around all over the planet. That's how much he enjoyed this compound. So the first part of this video is going to be about the positives, and then we're going to get to the negatives. I have a lot of notes here, and like I said, this may take a bit to go through, so if you want to skip ahead, find one of the links below. So, first of all, for the positives, Tren produces insane strength gains compared to any of the other compounds that Bob has used. Anavar, Bob used, and he felt like there were definitely some strength gains from Anavar. But his experience of Tren was that the gains were much more profound. Obviously, the gains from Anavar are going to come on very quickly. It takes a while for the Tren E to build up in your system. Bob logs all of his workouts. Every single set, every single rep, and he checks from week to week so that he can be constantly in a progressive overload state. And when Bob sets a PR, on his lift log, he writes PR in red ink. When Bob's Tren kicked in, his PR, his lift log was just PR, all day long in the gym. Bob usually works out for 2 hours, and it's just PR after another. I cannot tell you, from Bob's perspective, setting a PR on your last set, of a 2-hour workout is an amazing feeling. And one of the other things that Tren is so unbelievable at producing is the endurance to be able to still be firing on such a high level that 2 hours into your workout, you can set PRs. Bob would routinely lift for 2 hours, get into the car, disappointed that he had to come home. Disappointed that, you know, I got shit to do in personal life. He didn't want to come home from the gym. He could have lifted for 3 hours a day, he felt like, minimum. The endurance produced by Tren is godly. Everything about this compound is godly. Trenbolone makes you feel like you are literally a god, and like everyone around you is a fucking peasant. It is so powerful in its ability to alter the mind and alter your performance that that Bob cannot imagine how a person would dislike this compound. Intensity. There is so much intensity on Trenbolone. Everywhere Bob went, he was just like a pit bull in the dog park. Laser eye focus in every conversation. He's literally just staring his eyeballs through the backs of the skulls of everyone he comes into contact with. It just made him feel powerful and confident and self-assured all day long. And we'll get to that later in the video where we talk about the fact that the self-esteem gains are so profound on Trenbolone that they really trespass into egotism and narcissism. And so, obviously from the point of view of the user, at least in Bob's case, this felt amazing. There was no part of the extreme narcissism that this drug produced that he felt uncomfortable with. Bob's wife had a different story to tell, but again, we'll get to that later. The next thing I want to talk about in the positives group is Trenbolone's recomp ability. This is, to Bob's mind, what really started the love affair. So Bob had done multiple bulking cycles with Test and Deca and D-Ball. He had done different things to try to get as much size as he could because he was coming from a base of being very skinny, and in that process picked up, you know, a reasonable amount of body fat. And so he decided, hey, I want to do a cutting cycle and just see what all of this looks like underneath. So Bob, and I'll get the details of the weights and the starting points in the next video, but Bob set out to cut, and as he started using Tren in a calorie deprived state, he noticed that, one, he had no loss of intensity in the gym, no loss of strength. In fact, quite the opposite, his strength's going through the fucking roof. And then the next thing that he noticed was he wasn't losing weight, which at first was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I'm cutting, I'm in a calorie deficit, I'm in a calorie deficit. And then day by day, he noticed his abs coming in, the dryness, the water seeming to shed off of his frame. Every day he's looking harder, more vascular. The muscles are looking full and pumped. And yet the weight is barely coming down. And Bob started to realize that what was happening was an intense recomp effect. So Bob's measuring his biceps every day to confirm his suspicions. And as his weight is slowly coming down or staying the same, his bicep size is going up. So that confirmed to Bob that in fact what was happening was he was building muscle while losing fat on this compound, and that was an unbelievable experience for Bob because in previous cutting phases, he lost muscle. Bob went on a cut where he cut 12 pounds of body fat, and the appeal to his body was very negative. He looked very flat. His workout suffered. He had no intensity in the gym because of the calorie deprived state. And so he didn't feel good in this cutting phase, and he didn't feel like his muscles looked good at the end of it. And then you throw Trenbolone in the mix, and it's like as he's leaning down, he's becoming more of a monster at the same time, and everyone around him is noticing. Guys in the gym, people on the street, getting gas, getting groceries, people are making comments about his shoulders, his vascularity, just this hulking difference in his physique. And that is where the love affair really began. I already mentioned that the Tren is going to produce unbelievable amounts of hardness in the muscle and insane vascularity. Now, admittedly, you've got Anavar in the mix too, so that's adding to it. Let's be completely transparent. This is not a Tren-only cycle. So some of these extra aesthetic effects can be attributed to the Anavar, but I don't think I think it's well accepted that Trenbolone as a compound seems to produce a specific type of look. It's almost like you can look at a guy and you can go, he looks a little Trenny, at least, right? Like there does seem to be a specific just aesthetic look that Trenbolone produces, and that was certainly Bob's effect or Bob's experience. So at this point, Bob is completely in love. He's ready to divorce his wife. He's ready to try to find a way to marry Tren. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but to a degree, it can be that powerful. It can produce a feeling that is so strong that it can kind of mute the other things in your life. And saying that seems like a good point to segue into the negatives. What are the negatives attributed to Trenbolone? Well, obviously, anybody who's ever studied this compound knows that it is notorious or reportedly notorious for producing aggression, Tren Sweats, Trensomnia, paranoia, violent outbursts and behaviors, and then obviously the narcissism that I talked about a little bit earlier. For all the ways that Bob loves Tren, the second sort of Dr. or like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, like the Mr. Hyde version of this love affair story is that these negative effects are real. There is, in Bob's experience, no real way to prevent them, but Bob did find ways to sort of live with them. The aggression that Bob felt was very profound. It was very real. Bob experienced it in the majority, like his experience was that the majority of the aggression came in that uptick where you start injecting the compound and it's rising in your system, and it's almost like the system's not really prepared or it doesn't know what to expect, and so there's some reactions, and then once you stabilize, your serum concentration stabilize, and you've had several weeks with the compound in your system, you start to become more comfortable with it. But Bob did experience a tremendous amount of anger and aggression early on in the process. One of the things that happens, however, is that once you start to watch your body morph, once you see the power of this compound, you do not want to do anything to terminate this cycle. You certainly don't want to get arrested. So, Bob had an experience where he was in the gym and there's this guy that's walking around that absolutely reeks of body odor. I mean, this guy stinks so bad, it's like he's never even walked down the fucking deodorant aisle to have possibly purchased a stick, and clearly doesn't bathe. We're not talking about like an odor that you smell if you're really close to somebody. We're talking about the guy's 3 machines down, and with every inhalation in your workout, you can just smell this toxic stench that is burning the hairs out of your nostrils. And Bob can feel himself starting to spiral out of control. He wants to go and grab an easy bar, curl bar, and just beat this guy to death with it for this offensive odor that he's spreading across the gym. And then suddenly it's like, whoa, whoa, calm down, Bob. You're being fucking crazy. This is a little extreme, Don't do something stupid and get yourself in trouble and have to pull the plug on this cycle. Fuck the stinky guy, right? We can't be worried about him. We've got to protect the cycle. And this kind of thinking, as insane as it may sound to some of you, especially if you've never used this compound, is one of the tools that Bob used to try to manage what can be otherwise a mindfuck level of sudden aggressive thoughts. And that's what Bob's experience with aggression really was. You certainly, in his estimation, feel it. You know, like if you've ever gotten angry and you feel that heat spread across you, that shit happens rapidly. And then the brain kicks in and it starts like conspiring some stuff that it wants to do. It's not the kind of aggression that's like haphazard, like you just snap and then you're punching somebody. It's way more cold and calculated. Like you're not just gonna, in Bob's experience, you're not gonna just get pissed and punch the guy next to you. You're gonna start concocting these evil schemes to fuck this guy's shit up. And so it's in this process of concocting that you can sort of get a grip and go, okay, wait a minute, this is next level aggression I'm experiencing and I need to dial this shit back. So next on the list, aside from the notable aggression, is the Tren Sweats. Bob experienced Tren Sweats on both of his cycles, and one of the things that he found interesting was that the Tren Sweat intensity seemed to be dose dependent in an unsuspected type of way. So the Tren Sweats for Bob were the worst on the 350 milligram cycle and decidedly better on the 500 milligram cycle. On the 350, Bob experienced Tren Sweats that were so bad that he would wake up literally feeling like he was in a puddle. The bed sheets would be saturated. His body would be covered in just a sheen of sweat, and then he could move under the covers and then feel the chill of the cold air on the sweats, which made sleeping difficult because every time he tried to roll over, he was wet and cold at the same time. Sweating from the face, the hair, the pillow is wet. His wife is soaking wet. Like, this is some insane sweating we're talking about. This is not like the temperature got a little high in your house and you were under too many blankets. We're talking about what felt like a severe, to Bob, felt like a severe, biological thing that was going on. That did seem to taper with time to a more manageable level, but was certainly problematic throughout the end, starting probably in week 5, and Bob ran the first cycle for 9 weeks. And so 5, the majority of those weeks were rather wet. And lots of changing of the sheets and extra showers, and it's something that he definitely experienced. Then in the 500 milligram cycle, the sweating was substantially less. He had a couple of bad nights when the compound was going up, and then once it reached serum concentration, the sweating was substantially better, and Bob actually learned to look forward to it, if that makes any sense. Like, Bob began to view the sweats as just one of the many signs that this compound was really working in his body. He just set his mind to it when he was going to sleep at night. He actually would just grab his wife and just spoon her like intensely in the night, just press himself against her and just sweat together. And his wife and his wife almost turned it into an intimate thing. It's like you take this otherwise uncomfortable situation and you just engage with your wife and sweat together in this like Tren-induced, I don't even know. Like, luckily for Bob, his wife is very agreeable to this and it's probably just evidence of how badly she loves to be cuddled. So, Tren Sweats are for real. Trensomnia is for real. This was one of the biggest things that Bob hated about the Tren, the things that he did struggle to like try to cast in a positive light, because the sleep was negatively affected in a major way. And to drive home how negatively affected, Bob was already taking 10 milligrams of Ambien to try to sleep at night. So you've got 10 milligrams of Ambien that basically feels like it's doing absolutely nothing. He's popping Ambien and he feels like he'd go to the gym an hour later. And so his sleep deprived, it got down to where he was probably getting 4, maybe 5 hours of actual sleep a night, lots of tossing and turning, waking up, struggling to go back to sleep. And so obviously when you're not sleeping well, that can have some effects. People talk about Tren paranoia a lot, and I believe Derek has made the point that the paranoia and some of the anger and the aggression could likely come from just lack of sleep and how that can negatively affect the brain. So definitely an unfavorable effect from Tren. One of the things that's interesting is despite the fact that you're getting 4.5 hours of sleep, 5 hours of sleep a night, you still work out like a savage. I mean, he's still lifting for 2 hours a day. He's setting PRs throughout his entire cycle. He's gaining or cutting or, he's recomping throughout the entire cycle. There are 0 signs of overtraining, 0 lethargy in the gym. Lots of caffeine was deployed, but it almost is like the Tren makes it to where you don't need the sleep. He certainly didn't experience any signs in his body of sleep deprivation. Like I said, no overtraining, no trouble recovering, healing, and being ready for the next workout. The next thing I'd like to talk about is what I mentioned earlier, which is the extreme narcissism. Like I was saying, this compound really made Bob feel like a god. And so while that feels amazing to the user, it can be very negative for the people around him. If you imagine what it would be like trying to maintain relationships with your wife, your kids, your coworkers, people that you know from the gym, where you literally walk around the world feeling like you are king. Like it's almost like you walk in the room and you expect everybody to just bow to your almighty greatness. And so you have to be very careful to separate what you're feeling that is induced by this compound and who you really are, so that you don't destroy relationships. Tren has been called the relationship killer, and I think this is one of the reasons. If your girl threatens to leave you or something on Tren, you're like, bye, see ya. There's a fucking line of them out there I can replace you with. You've already probably had so much sex with this woman that she can't walk anymore anyway, and so you're like, bye. The thing that also occurs with the extreme egotism is there seems to be a lack of care for consequences. Bob did have some marital problems during this compound, and he reported that he kind of didn't give a shit. Like, you're so focused on your routines. I mean, all you're really thinking is gains, lift, eat, get as much sleep as I can so I can go back to the gym and work some more. Like, that becomes your primary focus, and a lot of things take a back seat, except for sex. Sex does not take a back seat. One of the other very potentially negative effects of Trenbolone is that in Bob's case, he could not stop thinking about sex. He's trying to get sex from his wife 2-3 times a day, to the point that he literally exhausts his own body. Bob is having so much sex with his wife that, orgasm quality diminishes if you just are doing it all the time, every day. There becomes physiological effects where literally the body struggles to keep up with the brain's desire. Bob lost count of how much money he spent on sex toys so that he could keep the party rolling. Like, mentally or physically, he's tapped out to some level, and so he's buying his wife all of these sex toys so they can continue. He can pleasure her in different ways. He can do all these different things. I had intended to make to be more transparent about Bob's sexual escapades, but I don't really feel comfortable at this point even conveying this on my channel. Maybe in a later video I will talk about some of the things that Bob discovered during this cycle that really is a game changer sex-wise. So if you guys have an interest in hearing that, comments in the section below, maybe I'll make another video. But the sexual thoughts become a problem when they trespass outside of your relationship, Bob started looking at every woman he saw in a different way. He's not the kind of guy who walks into the store and sees a girl busting out of her top and starts thinking all kinds of dirty thoughts. This is not Bob's nature. But on Trenbolone, it's very different. Every woman's body becomes very sexualized. Women look better on Tren than they do off. Like, everything just changes. This girl that you've known forever all of a sudden looks like a fucking supermodel. Everyone is sexual. Everything is sexual. It is very, very primal in its way that it drives this sexual need, and it can be very difficult to overcome when you're trying to be like a normal human being and you're trying to just do your job or whatever, and you cannot get these thoughts out of your head. And so definitely something to consider. Bob is not a young man. And so I can't imagine what it would be like for like a 20, 25-year-old guy using this compound who's already in the prime of his sexual life. Seems like he could get himself into a lot of trouble. And Bob did in fact do some very stupid shit, admittedly, on this cycle that almost got him divorced. So guys, if you're experimenting with this compound, please be aware of that. Before I get to the number one thing that Bob hated about the Trenbolone, I do want to go just through the list of things that Bob's wife said she experienced as negatives during the cycle. She reported a constant intensity in Bob. Bob, like I said, with the laser focus, he was just so driven all the time that it's hard to get a word in edgewise. All of his conversations were very bodybuilding oriented, and the level of intensity that just drives all night long. She's trying to go to bed, she's trying to wind down, and Bob is like an ADHD kid bouncing off the walls, just cannot get enough of her attention, conversations, etc., etc. And so the intensity can be very overwhelming for those around you who are not experiencing the effects of this compound. She felt like he was constantly looking for fights. So this is something that Bob experienced different than his wife. He felt like the anger was easily managed, that he had it well under control, that everything was good, and she felt like he was walking around the world just like half-cocked or more than half-cocked, like he was just waiting for an excuse to go off about something. And that being said, one of the things Bob did experience, which echoes her sentiments here, Tren seems to make everyone around you a moron. Like, that's the way Bob felt. He felt like people were just going out of their way to be as dumb as humanly possible. That's irritating. And so he would get irritable with people at work or people in his home or in line at the bank or wherever, because it just, in his estimation, just probably due to the extreme narcissism and egotism, he felt people were just complete idiots and they were driving him mental on the road and everywhere he went. She expressed that he had a total lack of care for consequences, which I suspect is connected to the fact that there was some misbehaviors that she tried to call to his attention, and he was kind of like, well, fuck it, I don't care. And so lack of consequences can definitely be a problem in a relationship if you don't value your partner's feelings and emotions and take them seriously and put them above your own, which is fucking hard on Trenbolone. She expressed he often was in like a disconnected state. And again, this is one of the things where Bob and his wife differ. Bob never felt a loss of love for his wife. Bob never felt like he didn't want to be around her, he didn't want her company, but she just felt like there was a distance in him and that they were not able to connect on the same emotional level that they were prior to his cycle. She reported that his mood was very unstable, that he could be a lover in one minute and a hater in another, and that not that this was completely atypical of Bob, because Bob sort of is an asshole year-round regardless, but that it was just accentuated by the Trenbolone. And this is something that's worth mentioning. Tren, in my estimation, does not make you a different person, but it will put a spotlight on all of your character flaws that you may not be willing to accept. You may imagine that you're not a very angry person, or you're not a violent person, or you're not an abusive person, or you're a lover, or you're whatever, and you may not be being totally honest with yourself about your motivations and about your true character, And if you're not, you're going to find out, because Tren is going to exacerbate all of your character flaws or character boons and just exaggerate them. And so these mood swings are common in Bob, but were much more problematic on the cycle. Bob's wife also reported that he seemed to have some sort of breathing issues, primarily that Bob was panting a lot. This is something that Bob noticed also, and I suspect it was due to his blood pressure increase, but he sort of had labored breathing, it sounded like, bending over to tie his shoes, sometimes just laying flat in bed, working at a desk. None of this seemed to negatively affect his workouts, but he did sort of have that kind of bodybuilder-like panting breath, like he couldn't really catch his breath at any given time, and that side effect subsided when Bob went off the cycle. So again, I think it's probably due to blood pressure, but who knows for certain. The other interesting thing that his wife reported was that Bob smelled kind of funny. She said that it was different than just like typical, it wasn't like sweat related, although that going to the gym and sweating made it worse, but that just his skin in close proximity often had like a sweet, sour odor that would come from the pores. She almost felt like it was like the compound literally leaving the body through the pores, although I don't think that it necessarily does that. But she definitely felt like on both cycles, Bob had an odor that would emanate from the body that was atypical. So something to be aware of. Again, guys, if you are considering using this compound, it may make you smell a bit odd to the opposite sex or to a coworker, or I don't know. Obviously, I don't have any interaction with his coworkers, but yeah, who knows? So something else that she reported. So that's basically Bob's wife's list. Her total estimation of the value of this drug is very different than Bob's. Bob has, like I said in the beginning, a profound love affair for the compound, and in his wife's estimation, she could definitely just not do it, or not have him do it. But I do, before the end of this video, which is getting very long at this point, want to talk about the one thing in all of these things that I've discussed for 30 some odd minutes now. The number one thing that Bob hated the most about this Tren cycle, or his Tren cycles, multiple, was that the Trenbolone seemed to cause excessive amounts of violent blood sugar crashes. In the beginning, Bob didn't know what it was and he thought he was dying. It seemed to occur, well, it occurred all the time. I think one of his first experiences with it was in the morning. He got up and he drank like a muscle milk without very many carbs in it. And then 15 minutes later, he starts feeling really badly, just kind of strangely tired all of a sudden, lethargic, and then this progressed to sort of a enhanced body temperature and kind of sweating, and then shakiness, and then lightheadedness, and he's on the floor and he's thinking he's dying. Luckily, he started drinking something and the symptoms recovered. Didn't think anything about it. It kept happening. Luckily, Bob had a blood glucose meter on hand at home. Started checking his blood sugar and found that all throughout the day, in various different conditions, his blood sugar would just drop to like 60, 50, like super low, rapid crashes in blood sugar. If you've never experienced, I think that's hypoglycemia, it is a miserable feeling. It's something that I've dealt with in my life, and it is a miserable feeling. It will make you think you're dying or something is seriously wrong with you, and then you get your blood sugar level back up and you're totally fine again, as if nothing had ever happened. And so one of the interesting things that Bob discovered was, obviously there's a number of things that can make it crash. Eating a little bit of candy, 20 minutes later, crash. Having pure protein, 20 minutes later, crash. All throughout the day, sex, during sex, blood sugar crashes. Let me tell you, if your blood sugar crashes in the middle of sexual intercourse, you will lose your erection. Pretty much guaranteed. then of course you think you're going to die. So it's really just an uncomfortable, miserable thing to have to deal with. One of the things, interestingly, that Bob noticed was that when he kind of cheated on his diet and would have like a soda or like a 7-Up or a Sprite or something throughout the day, his blood sugar would stay more stable. And then he tried just inserting small amounts of carbs, like in the form of dextrose, crash. So Bob started doing some research, and I'm going to make an entire video on this, and found out that apparently fructose, like high fructose corn syrup, is digested differently in the body than dextrose, where dextrose causes more violent, insulin-related effects, that the fructose is digested primarily in the liver, and that this seemed, anecdotally, I have no idea why this would be the case, but it seemed to help Bob control his blood sugar problems. And so, again, I'll do another video where I'll get all of the data and we can exhaustively tear it apart and find out if there's anything to this idea that maybe fructose is better for dealing with Tren blood sugar crashes. I'd never heard of Tren causing this in the past. And one of the things that Bob started to figure out was that he felt like a lot of the Tren aggression was connected to the preceded the blood sugar crash. So a lot of the times that Bob experienced anger was because he was hangry. And it was like the body needs calories, and he's getting angry, and then he could insert food and prevent the anger spike or prevent the blood sugar crash depending on what he ingested. And so this made cutting on Trenbolone more difficult than he had hoped, just due to the fact that you can't be in the floor with a 60 blood sugar every 2 hours. So definitely something to look out for if you seem to be prone to those types of effects. So despite all of those things being said, it is worth potentially looking into. One of the things that Bob had considered when he was coping with all of these blood sugar crashes is maybe that is what makes Trenbolone this amazing cutting compound. Like, it seemed like in his body, the Tren would just gobble up any carbs that were put in there. Like, he felt like he could ingest way more carbs than usual and still be losing weight or staying very lean. And so it is very likely that on some metabolic level that Tren is interacting in the system and consuming, the calories that you feed it and turning it into muscle or whatever it does, and that is in of itself what makes it such a tremendous cutting compound. I will try to do more research on that topic as well to better understand it if there is any data available. Lastly but not least, it did occur to me there was one other thing, and this is not so much a Tren thing as it is, I'm afraid, a 19-nor compound problem, but Bob struggled with gyno throughout his cycle. He is very hesitant to overdose his Arimidex for fear that he could crash his estrogen. And so he did get blood work done in the middle of the cycle to check his estrogen level, and at one point it was high, like in the 170s range or something, and then he knocked that back down, but the gyno never subsides during the cycle. He had the same problem with DECA, causing progestogenic related gynecomastia and lumps. Like, it seems to be a swelling of the gland and not something that's like actually adipose tissue being deposited. He will see when his system is completely cleaned out if that is in fact the case. But on Bob's 500 milligram Tren cycle, the gyno was very noticeable and relatively unsightly. And so in future cycles, he's probably going to have to just give in and try the cabergoline, although he is admittedly a bit concerned about its connection with left ventricular hypertrophy. So there you have it, an exhaustive, hopefully, breakdown of the highs, the lows, everything that you can expect when running Tren E at these doses. One of the reasons that I have openly discussed the doses that Bob is using in his cycles, and even myself in my cycle, the 500 milligram test cycle, where I was running legally purchased testosterone cypionate, is because I patently reject this idea that's going around amongst some of the bigger names in the bodybuilding community. If you notice when you go online, there are very few people who will talk about what cycles they run, what cycles they know people ran, the Bobs in their lives ran, right? And so they are afraid to give the actual compounds, the actual doses that are being run. You keep hearing these big names talking about, oh, I'm doing a cycle of like 280 milligrams. And I'm like, cool, let us know when you actually start a cycle. What are we fucking talking about? Nobody gets huge on 200 milligrams of test. It's just absolute horseshit. And this idea that's being perpetuated, it seems, by people on Instagram, people on YouTube, everywhere you go, no one wants to talk about it. And they'll say, well, you know, I don't want to be responsible for someone getting onto steroids. I'm not trying to endorse the use of PEDs. I don't want some kid to go out and copy my cycle and hurt himself or hurt someone else. And I just think this is a shitty, pathetic dodge and cop-out. By that logic, then don't ever talk about the PRs you set in the gym ever again. Don't brag about your 300 plus bench press, your 500 plus squat, because some kid may just run out there, throw a bunch of plates on a fucking bench press and crush his sternum. So the logic just doesn't seem to follow. If people are going to take the things that you say and just immediately apply them to themselves and do something stupid, that's on them. There's a huge community of responsible bodybuilders, of responsible people who want to cycle the right way, and I think it's incumbent upon those of us who have developed any amount of knowledge or experience on these topics to share them in an instructive manner so that people will know what to expect and can make conscientious decisions for themselves. Continuing to brush these topics under the rug only leads people who are definitely going to use anabolics anyway to get the information from somebody who doesn't know what the fuck they are talking about. This Big Smo kid that I made a video about, this 14-year-old kid on Tren. Like, I wish the community at large would do a better job of publicizing good data so that people can make otherwise conscientious decisions with their own health. That being said, and in closing, I am not a doctor. I'm not your doctor. I'm not a trainer, lawyer. I'm nobody. I'm a fucking idiot that just likes to bodybuild. Do not take anything I'm saying as promotion of the use of drugs. Do not break the fucking law in your country. Do not take steroids. They probably won't even work for you. But if you want to try them, that is you, and you accept all of the responsibility for making that decision. I do not take steroids because they are illegal in my country. These delts that I've built are natty for life delts, and you should do the same. So hopefully this video has been informative. Hopefully you've gotten something out of it. Please share your comments in the section below. Please follow me on Instagram if you want to see more of my daily lunacy. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.